Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Reebok Floatride Energy 4. So I will be comparing this model to the 3 later in this video, and like with all my reviews, everything is timestamped down below, so jump around accordingly, get the info you need, and get out of here and go get your run on. But 3 pros that I have with this model is number 1, the Floatride Energy 4, much like the 3, is a good budget-friendly running shoe, especially for the more recreational runner. Now, will this be the best model for races? Not necessarily. It really depends on what you want. But if you're somebody who likes to tack on some short mid-range runs every single week, and even a long distance run here and there, and you don't feel like spending a ton of money on your running shoes, this could be a really good option to look into. It's kind of like a no-brainer, no-frills shoe in regard to running performance. And if you just need something to tack on and tackle some miles with on a weekly basis for $110 USD, this is a pretty good model to look into. The second pro that I have with this shoe is the upper construction. Now, I also have a gripe with the upper, which I'll cover in the next section, but why I like the upper is it breathes so well and it's so lightweight and it looks pretty good. So if you want to wear this shoe in the summer, for example, you're not going to probably have an issue with the feet getting too warm or running too warm in this model because the breathability, I think, is on point and it looks pretty good. So you can wear this shoe casually on a daily basis and it doesn't shout like running shoe. So the upper looks pretty good and it breathes really well, especially if you live in warmer climates. The third pro that I have with this model is Reebok used more recycled materials in this shoe than the Floatride Energy 3. So this model features at least 30% of recycled materials used. So if you are conscious of the materials used in your shoes, that could be a pro with this model. Now, I do wish Reebok provided more insights into what was recycled in the shoe, but it is pretty cool that they're implementing more recycled materials in this model. Now, as a whole, this shoe performs really well for the recreational runner, but now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with this shoe. So 2 potential cons that I could see folks having with this model is number 1, this is not going to be the best shoe in my opinion for people that need more stability, especially through the midfoot here. So why I like the upper is for its breathability, lightweight nature, and appearance. But this upper doesn't do the best job at kind of holding the foot up. So even when this is fully tightened, you're not gonna get a ton of stability through the midfoot here. And if you do have a pronation bias when you run and you need a little bit more support there, unlike the 3 that had a slightly more rigid upper here that kind of held that foot up, this model starts to collapse. And I noticed this most on my slightly longer runs where I was starting to fatigue and my stride was getting a little bit slower. The second con that I have with this model is that if you want a shoe with maximal cushioning, I actually think the midsole in the 3 gave you more pop and a little bit more support than the Floatride Energy 4. This midsole starts to get a little bit firm over time, especially if you are doing longer distance runs, and that could definitely be something that bothers some runners who do want a little bit more cushion for longer distance runs. So if you do like a little bit more firmness, then I think you'll like that aspect. But if you want a little bit more cushion when you run, that could definitely be a drawback to this model. But now let's talk about the performance of the Reebok Floatride Energy 4. When discussing the performance of the Floatride Energy 4, I'm going to break this section to a few different parts. I'm going to talk about short runs, which is anything from 0 to 3 miles, mid-range runs, which is 4 to 6 miles, long distance runs, which is 7+ miles, and then I'm going to talk about walking and daily wear with this shoe. Now, when it comes to short runs, I actually think that's where this model is going to excel the most, and that's why I think the shoe is best for more like that recreational runner who's doing like a casual 5K here and there every single week and tacking on some short runs pre or post workout. The shoe's midsole will do a good job at accommodating that mileage and give you a nice level of energy return. Plus, it's soft enough to where I don't think you're going to feel beat up after running that distance in this shoe. For mid-range runs, this model also works really well. I think at that mileage, that's where this midsole is starting to get to that point to where it's starting to feel a little bit more firm, especially as you get more tired and as this midsole starts to compress a little bit more. I actually think this midsole has less pop than the 3 did, so that is something to consider if you're looking into the 4, but I do like the carbon rubber outsole, which is similar to the 3 and its lug patterning. The shoe feels good for treadmill running and outdoor running, so you can be a little bit more versatile with your running in the shoe, especially if you're doing more mid-range distances. For long distance runs, this model can be a little bit hit or miss. Now, some runners really like the Floatride Energy line for long distance runs, but personally, I would prefer more cushion for my long distance runs. I noticed that as I started to get more tired in the shoe, and I mentioned this in the cons, I started to have a little bit more pronation happening here because the midfoot support just isn't there, and I started to notice that the midsole was getting a little bit more firm, as in I was starting to really bottom out into my forefoot. So if you're somebody who likes more cushion, or if you are prone to feeling a little bit more heavy on your your feet, especially in your longer distance runs, this model may not be the best option to look into. Now conversely, if you like a little bit more firmness in regard to your shoe's midsole for long distance runs, then this model will likely feel pretty good for you. Now when talking about walking in daily wear, I think if you're wanting this shoe to do some running in, maybe do some hybrid training in, and then also do some walking in, this model will do really well. It feels very comfortable, and the 9mm heel to toe drop I think feeds pretty well into walking mechanics. And then for daily wear, I like the upper and its breathability. If you're wearing this in the summer or in hotter climates, this is actually a foot shoe that I would wear sockless in summer if I'm just rocking it out and about to run errands in, because it breathes so well and your feet are gonna feel pretty cool doing so. And I also like the appearance of this model because it does have a nice casual look to it. So I do think it works for a lot of different settings if you wanna wear this model for daily wear. So now let's answer the question, who is the Reebok Floatride Energy 4 best for? I think if you are a recreational runner who is tacking on short and mid-range runs every single week and you don't want to break your bank on a running shoe, this could be a really good option to look into. Now, I will say, and this might be a hot take, I actually think the 3 is the better option between the 3 and 4. I like the upper a little bit better, and I actually think the midsole gives you a little bit more energy return. So if you can, look into that model, especially if there are discounts on that shoe. But the 4 performs pretty dang well as well, and it's consistent for its budget-friendly nature. When it comes to sizing in the Reebok Floatride Energy 4, you should be safe going true to size in this model. Now this running shoe does run a little bit long, so if you have a notably narrow foot, then you may want to size down a half size, but for most runners, I think you should be safe going true to size in this model. When chatting on the price of this shoe, you can expect to pay around $110 USD. Now, for what this shoe has to offer in regard to performance, I think that price point is incredibly fair. And honestly, the Reebok Floatride Energy 3 and 4, I would call them some of the best in class in regard to being really good budget-friendly running shoes for a variety of running contexts. When chatting on the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Reebok Floatride Energy 4, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 8.85 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this shoe is 9mm, and this model does have a thin, removable foam insole. All right, so now let's go over the construction of the Reebok Floatride Energy 4. Looking at the toe up here, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up. We don't have a thick toe guard in this model. So if you are doing any form of training, and this is speaking to more of like the hybrid workout folks out there, where you're doing any form of potential like prone to get up and run movement, that could be really problematic for this model's long-term upper durability. So definitely keep an eye on that if you plan to use this model for any form of training that could constitute any friction on the forefoot's upper. Looking at the midsole, we have a Reebok Floatride Energy foam that goes throughout the entirety of the shoe's midsole. And then turning over the shoe to look at the outsole, we have a carbon rubber outsole with a lug patterning throughout the midfoot and forefoot. Back here on the heel, we have a smoother texture, and the heel is beveled in this model. And then looking at the heel back here, we have a nice little counter and cup to really lock down that foot. And we have a flared heel with an external heel tab. That's great for easily getting the shoe on and off, especially if you want to wear them for daily wear and you don't feel like lacing them every single time. We have 6 core eyelets that run up the midfoot with a 7th back here for lace lock. The tongue is pretty lightweight, and we have some branding on the tongue with an additional loop that helps provide you with additional tongue security with this model, and the tongue is gusseted in the shoe. And then looking at the upper, we have a textile upper with some Reebok branding here on the lateral and medial side and back here on the heel. The upper itself is really lightweight and breathable. In different lighting, you can actually almost see my fingers through this model. So that is speaking to the point of how breathable this shoe is. And then looking at the insole, this model once again has a removable insole. It is thin and foam, so if you want to put your own insoles into this model, you can certainly do so. But as a whole, that is pretty much the gist of this model's construction. If you have additional questions, hit me in the comments below. All right, so now let's compare the Reebok Floatride Energy 3 to the Floatride Energy 4. So I'm going to talk about 4 construction differences between each model, and then we'll talk about some performance thoughts. So the first major difference between these shoes is the upper constructions, and this is probably the most notable difference between these models. So in that Floatride Energy 4, we have that breathable textile upper, and then in the 3, we have a square knit upper that has a few layers throughout. It feels a little bit more rigid and a little bit more heavy, and that's why I actually like this model a little bit more, because it helps lock down that foot and give you a little bit more security compared to the lightweight nature of the 4. The second difference is the heel construction. So both models do feature a flared heel for the most part. However, in the 3, we do not have an external tab, and that flare is a little bit more exaggerated than in the 4. In the 4, we have a tab, and the heel has a little bit less of a flare to it. The third difference is the tongue constructions. So in the 4 here, we have a very lightweight, what feels like a mesh tongue or even a knit material, and we have an external loop here to help lock that tongue down. In the 3, the tongue's a little bit thicker in nature and there is no external loop. Personally, I do wish there was a loop. However, the gusseted nature of this tongue does help provide it with additional security. The fourth difference between these models is the materials themselves. So in the Floatride Energy 4, once again, this model is made with at least 30% of repurposed materials, whereas the 3 doesn't really feature that at all. Now, the midsole and outsole are pretty much the same, and this takes us to our performance talk, because while they are the same, I feel like the 3 has a little bit more density to it. And please, like, if you have worn both models, hit me in the comments below and share your thoughts, because I feel like maybe it's a placebo with how this upper interacts and how it feels when I'm running, but it feels like the midsole in the 3 is a little bit more like lively, and it gives you a little bit more pop and energy return, especially when you're doing fast-paced runs. In the 4, it feels like this midsole just compresses a little bit more and you almost bottom out faster in the shoe. Now again, that could totally be placebo, and I don't want to be talking offhand here, so if you've worn both models, please hit me in the comments below and let's share some thoughts on this take. But when it comes to performance, I like the 3 a little bit better for that reason. And that's why I suggest if you can find the 3 for a really good price, I would say go for that model over the 4 for the time being. The 3 is probably going to be discontinued eventually anyway, so if you can find them on sale, I think they are going to be a really strong performer and they're going to perform the same as the 4, if not a little bit better. But if you have any questions on the 3 and 4 and which you should go with, hit me in the comments below and I will gladly help out where I can. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Reebok Floatride Energy 4. Across the board, this is a very strong performing shoe. Now I do think there are some niche contexts in regard to running where this model is going to fall short, and I actually like the 3 better than the 4, but this shoe is a very strong performer nonetheless. If you have any questions on this model, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.